Hey, what is up? And welcome to Flow. And today's lesson, we are going to be talking about reading for max learning and everything there is to know about the art and science of reading. Let's get into the lesson. Alright, reading to learn. Note that this lesson is about reading to learn and to grow. Not reading for entertainment purposes or for pleasure purposes, and there's definitely a time and place for that, but our focus for this lesson is really about reading for learning and for growing. I want to start off with a little story. There was once a phase in my life where it was like one of the lowest moments of my life. Really depressed and sad and lonely as you can possibly get. And one day, I don't know how, but I ended up at a bookstore. And in that bookstore, I would just go across these bookshelves and I would just pick out books and I would just start to read. And this really fascinated me. And before you know it, by the end of the day, I got into flow states. And I was at this bookstore for many hours, and it soon started to turn dark, right? And the bookstore started to close. I was like, wow, I was in this bookstore for multiple hours. And that little instance, that little moment at that bookstore really started this big domino effect of me really learning and reading as much as I could, because I realized from that day, wow, I really learned a lot from reading these books today. And so I went back and I really made this a big habit. And I went back to that bookstore for, I think, about a year and a half where I didn't miss a single day of going to that bookstore and just picking up books and reading them. Not a single day. Even on the weekends, I would go out to that bookstore and I would start to read. And during that time, I've read hundreds of books just within a year and a half of reading. And reading is just one of those things that has had a tremendous effect on my life and my learning and in my improvement in growing as a person and just learning about the philosophies of life. It really got me really far by reading those books. And that's why I believe reading is such a crucial element to flow, to learning, and also to life. So a question that most people have is why do we read? Why do we read, right? Well, again, this lesson is about reading for learning, right? And so there would be these authors and writers and these great business minds and entrepreneurs and creators and in every different craft you can imagine. They would sit down with other writers so that the content becomes really good, and they just pour out their ideas that they've collected in life. And so they're sharing their life experiences, and some people write books so that they can teach everything that they've learned in life before their time is up. So they're not holding anything back. And it's if people are at the near end of their life, it's not like they're gonna benefit from profiting from making these books, right? Their purpose is not to make money off these books. I mean, because they're near the end of their life. They're going to leave this place soon. So it's they can't take that money with them, right? They can't take the knowledge with them either. So they're just really trying to teach what they've learned in life to other people. And so these writers or these people with these life experiences across these different subjects, they would sit down with really good writers and other editors so that their content is superb. And then they would give this to you in a book format so that you can learn. And so you're pretty much getting decades or a lifetime of information in just a few hours of reading. This is why reading is so crucial, because it's a shortcut to learning things and to learn things as fast as possible. And in my honest opinion, published books are a little bit better than self-published books. But of course, some self-published books are amazing too. But published books, because they have other writers checking your work and other editors going through that entire process, it does produce a better content and a better end result than a traditional non-traditional self-published book would. So reading is a shortcut. I mean, people explored the world and the oceans and they created a map, right? So that we don't have to create our own map. So it's kind of if you're trying to do something by yourself without any prior knowledge, it's you're sailing into the ocean with no sense of direction. It's all right, where's America? Maybe it's this way. And then you just start going that way with no sense of direction. So reading gives you a map. It's a shortcut. And people before us have already done the hard work for us. They've explored, they've created things. So we are just piggybacking on their ideas. And it's seriously a big shortcut to going to where we want to get to. And so try to imagine building a computer from scratch without knowing anything about it. It's where do you even start, right? So we have to model after the successful. We have to model what works. And it's the old saying goes, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's just use the wheel. Maybe innovate the wheel so that it's more efficient. And so this is from Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. He says that survival machines that can simulate the future are one jump ahead of survival machines who can only learn on the basis of overt trial and error. The trouble with overt trial is that it takes time and energy. The trouble with overt error is that it is often fatal. Simulation is both safer and faster. The evolution of the capacity to simulate seems to have culminated in subjective consciousness. It's pretty much saying that learning from other people, learning through not our own like trial and error, but learning through other people's trial and error is a shortcut that can really leap us ahead in evolution and evolving in ourselves. So first-hand experience, what this means is just learning from first-hand action, right? Taking really lots and lots of action. And it's also known as street smart. So it's like if you think about the terminology street smart, it's like, what does that really mean? What does street smart really mean? It's pretty much just learning from first-hand experience, learning by yourself, right? That's pretty much what street smart is. Learning about the streets from your own experience. But human beings, I mean, we've become who we are because we have learned socially, like what Richard Dawkins says, like trial and error, it takes time and energy, right? So when we learn things socially, we are bypassing, we are learning a lot quicker. We learn faster by learning from each other. And this is known as second-hand experience, learning from others, aka book smart. You know, there's like the saying, I'd rather be street smart than book smart. But the thing is, you don't only want to be book smart because that's just like learning without doing much. It's just, you know, you're just drowning in theory and not doing any action. But you don't only want to be street smart because you are learning linearly, which means it's too slow. But it's when you fuse the two together that you experience fusion power in your brain. And so reading without doing, it's like potential power. You're not really doing anything with it, but you know about it, but you're not going anywhere. It's like zero, produces nothing. But action, without reading, that you get somewhere, but it's linear. It's at a very slow snail's pace. But when you combine the two, action with reading, and I would also put in here feedback. If you combine that, remember we learned about feedback in the deep learning lesson, and you get exponential growth. So that's why we should be reading plus take action. And so remember that story of how I read and read hundreds of books within like a few years, a short amount of time? Well, the thing is, this is what happened. I would read these books, and then after a short while, like I would pick up a book, right? I'll pick up like a random book and I'll start to read it. And as I'm reading this book, it would seem very familiar. And I would be like, this sounds very familiar. I think I've read this, something similar to this in the past. And as I kept reading and reading, I realized that, wait a minute, I already read this book. I read this book, I think like 6 months ago, but I forgot all about it. Right? So in the past, what I was doing is I was just reading for the sake of reading. I was just reading for the sake of increasing my numbers of reading. But I asked myself, what was the purpose of me reading in the first place? The point of me reading in the first place was to learn. So it's kind of like, you know, when you are in college and you take a college course, and then you didn't study the entire time, and then all of a sudden finals come up, and so you're cramming on the last day, right? So you cram and cram and cram, and you barely pass the test, but you pass the class. And like 6 months later, you forgot everything that you learned in that class. So it's like, it's not really learning because it's just temporal learning and just not something permanent. So that was the same thing that was happening to me with these books. It's like, I'll be reading and reading at a fast pace, but I wasn't really absorbing it, especially in terms of permanence. I was just reading for the sake of reading, for the sake of, you know, racking up those numbers, which is kind of pointless when I'm not learning anything. So I call this egoic reading. I was reading for the sake of increasing my book numbers and just to cross it off my checklist, but not for the sake of learning, which was defeating the entire purpose. Why was I reading in the first place? Because I can improve, because I can learn. So it was just to feed my own ego of how many books I read. Look how many books I read. I read hundreds of books, but that was not the point, right? And the point is to learn and to grow and to improve on life. So reading to learn. And so here's the thing, right? So like I said, I was racking up those numbers. I was reading through these things really quickly. And speed reading, it does have its time and place. But I really don't believe speed reading is the best way to learn. And in the past, I've taken many speed reading courses. I've gone through the books on speed reading. I've even downloaded and bought a software that helps me with speed reading. But again, it was defeating the purpose. Speed reading does have its time and place, but ultimately it didn't really help me to permanently learn and to learn at a deep level. Remember, we are reading to learn. We've talked about this in the deep learning lesson. What's the best way to learn? Well, it's deliberate learning, right? Struggling. Struggling is good and slow is fast. So I'm not saying that speed reading is bad. There's definitely a time and place. And especially if like your base speed reading is very slow, like you're reading at like a third level type of reading really slow, then you really want to amp that up. and you want to be able to increase like your base reading speed. But if you're reading something at like 2,000 words a minute, you're honestly really glossing everything. It's not really deep practice, right? Like imagine trying to speed read through a quantum physics book at 2,000 words per minute, or something like very complex like engineering or biochemistry, right? It's just not going to work. No matter what the speed reading experts say, it's just not going to work. I mean, try it out yourself, right? It's really not going to work. I've tried this out. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to sink into my head. And it's going to be harder to learn. So sometimes you really have to be slow and deliberate. So speed reading versus deep reading. Let me give you some comparisons. And speed reading has its place, like general books or like magazine articles and like short little ebooks, newspaper maybe. But I would stay away from newspapers, right? I told you to go on an information diet. And nonfiction sometimes, and especially like general health, self-help books that, they're not really deep and they're just like giving you general type of advice. And so speed reading you want to do to get like the gist of things. Whereas deep reading, you want to use for like better personal development books, stuff that goes in really deep, science and fiction. It's like, why would you speed read if you're reading for pleasure? Why speed read? Why would you fast forward through a movie, right? You're watching the movie to enjoy it. So yeah, speed reading through things that you're reading for pleasure, it kind of defeats its purpose. And poetry is also for pleasure, right? Philosophy, and to learn, definitely you want to be deep reading. And so speed reading, mostly you can use this for like lower quality books, and deep reading for more quality books. And in terms of productivity, so I mentioned this, but speed is good. Speed is good, right? 80-20. And we really want to emphasize on the MVP, delivering something with that minimum value because it adds value. And creativity, outpouring of our ideas. And in terms of learning and skill building, slow is good. Remember, it's a deliberate practice. Slow is fast. And the editing process, that can also be a slower type of skill. And so again, don't read for the sake of reading. Don't read it, check it off your checklist or goal list. Read to learn. Not merely to memorize, but to understand. And that takes a little bit of a slower, more deliberate type of reading. So with learning as our focus, so what is reading? Let's define reading. Reading is just transferring information from one person or one source to another source. So how else can we transfer information? Well, there are a few ways, mainly 2 ways of transferring information. I mean, there's other ways too, such as like taste and smell. But if we're not really into like cooking and becoming chefs, then we don't really. That's like a less common form of transferring information than visually and auditorily. So the main two ways of transferring information is one visually and second auditorily. And the predominant of these two is actually visually. So visually, what does this mean? So we learn in terms of seeing things, learn by seeing mentors, coaches, we read things, books, courses, and we watch things, videos, tutorials. Second is auditorily. So we listen to things. We listen to, say, for example, audiobooks and podcasts. In terms of reading, we have ebooks and audiobooks, right? So this is like visual and auditorily, both at the same time. And through technology, we can actually embrace both. So reading, we have Kindle, we have physical books, and audiobooks, we have podcasts, Audible, and etc. And ideally, you really want to get good at both visual reading and auditory reading, which means listening. And so why do you want to get good at both? It's like, why can't I just listen to things? Because I don't want to read. Reading gets me to fall asleep. But like I mentioned, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you become mentally lazy at reading in the form of visually instead of auditorily, then you're getting mental lazy in other things. You're going to bring that everywhere you go. So how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it's going to transfer over. So don't be mentally lazy. Really get into the habit of reading both visually and auditorily. And if you start to get mentally lazy in one form, we'll start to get mentally lazy in other forms. You can make mental laziness a habit. Like I said before, it's like the worst type of laziness because you can't even see it. Or you can make deep learning a habit. Make this a habit. And even though we can listen to information, this it creates like an excuse to not read visually, right? Like people use this as an excuse. I'm more of an auditory type of learner. It's like, yeah, but that becomes like a crutch. That's also practicing mental laziness, right? So let's not use that as an excuse, and let's try as much as possible to develop the skill of deep learning. So even though we can listen to information, some books even today are not available in audible format. Like a lot of gems of knowledge that I've read, I can only find in physical forms. There will be amazing, like eye-opening books that I would read, and you can't find them in the Audible version or the Kindle version. You can only get them through physical books, and a lot of these are out of print, so you have to get like the used versions. And so some are out of copy, and you can only buy them used. For example, here's a little example, but this book is called Breakthrough Advertising. It's a great advertising book. It's like the Bible of advertising books, and you can only get it in the physical format. There's no Audible, there's no Kindle version, and this is out of print actually. So it really became really expensive because it became out of print. So there's a lot of demand, but not enough supply for it. So it became really expensive, a few $100 for this book. And this is a gem though. And a lot of books like this, there's no Audible version, there's no Kindle version. So you really have to pick up the skill of reading and deep reading, especially visually. So even though we have audio version, you still want to adopt the skill of visual reading. It's still very universal. It's like you're eventually going to read something somewhere, right? And especially in English. So there's like that whole like idea that China's going to take over the world. We're all going to be speaking in Chinese and everything. But here's the thing. Here's why I still believe English is the global language and will still be the global language for some time to come. It's because think about the internet. What language is the internet? What language is the internet written in? What is www, right? What does that stand for? It's like World Wide Web. What language is that? It's like it's in English, right? Like the entire internet backbone is written in English. So unless we have like a new form of communication that's better than the internet, I believe that English is not going anywhere. So actually English is a really great skill to have, and you should be grateful that you do know some English because it is an invaluable skill. So is reading. So if you combine the two, you can get those exponential results. All right, so it also helps with deliberate learning. Instead of being mentally lazy, we are activating that deliberate and mental side of us, and so we will start to develop more and more myelin, the talent neuron, myelin, or the sheeting around the neurons. And so what we don't use, we will lose. If we don't use our skills, myelin will start to fray, and we will start to lose the ability in the skill. And Mark Twain, he said that a person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read, right? It's like the same thing. If you won't read anything, it's the same thing as you can't reading something. Same thing with knowledge, by the way. If you know something and you don't use it, it's the same thing as somebody who doesn't have that knowledge. So you have to apply this, and we really got to read and apply our knowledge. So learning is the ultimate meta level skill and can be traded for anything else. And so let me give you some reading hacks, and I'm just going to explain some technology we can use to our advantage to learning at a more accelerated rate. All right, so the formats that we have are physical books, digital books, and Audible. And nowadays, I really embrace the digital format of both visual reading and both, auditorily reading. And the thing is, I loved physical books in the past. I grew up with them. It's how I learned to read. But I actually now stopped getting the physical form of books. And here's why. Like I would be lugging around like 2 to 3 books in my backpack, and these would be really heavy books, right? And it really started to take a toll on my back, and I developed like a herniated disc because I was lugging around this heavy backpack everywhere, carrying like 3 physical books at a time. So I thought, wow, this is not really sustainable, and so I have eventually made my way towards digital books and replacing all my physical books with digital ones now, because there is a better way of doing things now, a better way of transferring information. Because what is a book, right? What is a book? It's just information, transferring it from that author to another source, another person. So digital, I really embrace it now because I don't have to carry it around everywhere. I can just read it on my laptop or my phone even, right? And another thing with physical books is if I have to look up a certain information, say I want to look up like a section or like a quote from a book, say that I didn't bring the book with me, then I would have to like go back home and then to dig up the information inside of that book, right? Whereas with the digital format, I can carry it with me pretty much everywhere I go. It's with me at all times. And with digital format, you have the search function available, which you can't get in physical format. So I really like the digital format. And you're also saving trees, and you're also saving paper. So a little hack here. It's not really a hack, but I've been telling you to do this throughout the entire program. But for audio, you can put it on 1.5x to 3.5x speed now on Audible, and you can zip through the information a lot faster. And this really depends on the author or the narrator's voice. Some narrators, I can amp up to like 3 speed, but some I have to really tone it down to like 1.5x. So it really depends on the narrator and the pitch of that person's voice. And you can also use this on YouTube. It's pretty obvious, but you can put it on 1.25x to 2x speed. And here's my favorite hack of all, my favorite reading hack, is using Audible plus the Kindle version. So you're using both visual and the auditory version of reading things. So you put the Audible on 2.5x speed and you read the Kindle version at the same time. So you're getting both inputs. You're getting both visual input and auditory input at the same time. It's stimulating both parts of the brain, right? So this is like my big hack that I really love to use. And this is my favorite way of reading, by the way. And this is like my normal way of reading now. I use both the Audible version and the Kindle version. And it also helps me to get through the material a little bit faster than normal. And like I said, you want to raise your base level of speed up, but you don't want to make it like too crazy, like reading 2,000 words a minute, right? So as long as it doesn't require like deliberate type of learning, I would use this method. And so here's the little Amazon trick. So the Audible program is for $14.95 per month, and then there's like a free trial period, right? And then for every month you get 1 audiobook and 2 Audible originals. I don't really like the Audible originals. There's not really a big selection. So you're pretty much just getting 1 Audible book a month for $14.95. But there's a better way to go about this. It's a little trick. So say for example, you're trying to get this book, the audio version, and it costs $20.99 if you just get the audio version. But check this out. If you go onto the Kindle section right here, highlighted in pink, you can actually get both the Kindle and the Audible version for just a few more dollars than just the Audible price alone. So the Audible price with the Kindle version and the Audible version is $22.98. So with this method, you are getting the Audible book for $7.99, whereas the Audible program is $14.95 a month. So you're getting it for cheaper. And it's just a few more bucks to get both the Kindle and Audible version. So I would actually not opt in to, or I would not subscribe to the Audible program because this is a better and cheaper way. And here's the thing, watch this, check this out. Sometimes, actually, it's pretty common actually. I would say about 20 to 30% of the time. So say you're getting the Audible version, right? So say it costs you $15.99 for this book. But if you go onto the Kindle tab, again, check this out. Kindle price is $5.99, and look at the audiobook is just $1.99. Sometimes getting both of these is cheaper than getting the Audible version alone, which is way cheaper than the Audible subscription. And this is actually pretty common. It happens about 20 to 30% of the time. It doesn't happen with every book, but some books like this, you can get both the Kindle and Audible version for $15.99. Or I mean, not $15.99, $7.99 instead of $15.99. So it's just a little trick. So make sure to check the Kindle tab before purchasing the Audible tab, right? So that's just a little reading hack of mine. And so you also want to be listening to audiobooks on walks and commutes, and this is like the only time you can multitask, right? So you can listen to like an audiobook on your walks or commutes when you're driving. It's like you should be learning while you're driving. You're not making a good use of the time if you're just driving and maybe just like listening to music or something. You can use that time instead to get through a book, to learn more, to progress. And you can listen to audiobooks when you do your chores. I listen to audiobooks when I, do dishes or like clean my house and stuff. So how much to read? How much do I read? Here's the thing. Like I mentioned before, you don't want to be like speed reading through books like you're going through like M&Ms, right? Because it doesn't really solidify the learning. So what I used to do is back in the day, right? We used to read and read and read. I used to aim for like 2 books a week. Sometimes I would go through a book a day, right? I was just like speed reading through this thing. And that really didn't learn much by doing that. So I really didn't learn much. And now what I do is I aim for about 1 book a week or even lower than that. So I would go through like 2 books a month, but I would study that book. I would deliberately learn that book. And if it's a really great book, I would take really a lot of notes on it. I would make summaries on it. So I would really learn that book with depth. Again, what is the purpose of reading, right? We were reading for learning to improve our lives. And we can't do that if we just speed reading through everything. And combined ideas, all right? So we can also read multiple books of similar topics and ideas. And what this is doing is that you're getting insight from many different angles to form more of a complete and fuller picture. Think about like this program, for example, this flow program. It's a combination of multiple ideas about the same topic from different authors, right? So I'm getting many, many different perspectives and I'm portraying it to you that creates a bigger and fuller picture than just reading one book. So by reading one book, you might get like the gist of things, So you might get certain parts of the puzzle, but as you read more and more on this subject, read more books, then you get like the entire picture. So it's kind of like seeing like a mountain from like one angle and one perspective. Yeah, you can get an idea of how it looks like and everything, but if you get it from like multiple different angles and different shots and different vantage points, then you get like more of a complete picture. You understand it more. So that's why I also list multiple sources, right? I don't just list one. I list multiple authors and multiple writers and multiple geniuses because I get multiple views from different geniuses. I also combine ideas that are not related, by the way. So think about this. So ketosis, when I first tried it, people were raving about like the health benefits and everything. And to me, I was thinking like, what? Ketosis is, I mean, I get amazing health benefits, but ketosis gets me so much mental energy. Why isn't anybody talking about this part, the mental energy part, as much as the health part? So I combined this idea of like, ketosis is for the brain just as much it is for health, right? Ketosis can actually help us trigger flow states. So combining ideas that are not related is also a valuable skill. And this is also known as lateral thinking or thematic thinking. It's the ability to take a lesson from one subject and then transfer it to another subject, taking away a principle from one subject matter and applying it to something else. This is a great skill. It's one of the most important ways of thinking for intelligence, innovation, and creativity, especially for creativity. It's a good skill to cultivate. And let me just give you some examples. So we all know about Tesla and how innovative they are, right? But what they're simply doing is just they are combining different ideas from different subjects. So let's take the concept of like an electric car. What is an electric car? It's simply a combined idea of electrical engineering with batteries and computers, and then they brought that subject into the automobile world, right? So it's just taking an idea from one subject and applying it to another subject. And if you really think about what the electric car is, it's pretty much just a battery with a computer chip on wheels. That's pretty much what it is, right? A battery with a computer chip on wheels. So it's like combining those things and then bringing it into the automobile world. So another example is the iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, what did they do? They just simply combined the iPod, which is a music player, with the phone, with the internet. That's all they did, and the iPhone was born. So it's just combining different areas or different ideas from different subjects and bringing that into the current subject or whatever your craft is. So you can read different books from different subjects at the same time, by the way. So remember how I was lugging around like 3 different books at a time? So a lot of those times there will be 3 different subjects. And it's kind of like if you read from like 3 different books at once, like you start to get these different ideas and you start to apply it to different subjects. So it's like ideas making babies with each other. And so that really sparks a lot of like creativity and innovation and insights. And multiple readings. So you can also do multiple readings of the same exact book. And so you're probably saying, I don't want to read the same book over again, but doing this really reinforces the learning. It's like, why do we practice the same move over and over again to improve on it, right? So really it reinforces the learning. And when you read a good book through the second time, especially after some time has passed, you'll see something in it that you didn't see before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. You operate with a higher awareness because if it has been a long time since you read that book, you will have probably changed as a person. So your perspective will have also changed, and you're going to find that if you read that same book over again, you're going to get a lot of new insights from it. And if a book is good enough, read it multiple times. It really deepens the learning. You get more myelin insulation. And again, egoic reading. We don't want to place our egos in the way of our learning. It's the big learning killer. Don't discount the idea just because you've heard it already before. Don't discount it because I already know this stuff. That is the ego. And it will stop you from learning and becoming the best version of yourself. So you can always learn it again. You can always learn it better. Okay? And while reading, your current state is also really important. Remember, we've talked about different states. There's like the higher self and then like the lower self. And the state or your selective focus, like what's important to you at that time. Say you're reading a book and what was important to you at that time was, say you're practicing, dance or something. But then you read that same book again, and now your focus has shifted. So your focus is now on engineering or something. You're going to pick up different things that are related to engineering rather than dance in the past. So it has a tremendous effect on what information is catching your attention. Your learning depends on the current paradigm you're in. And if you read the same book over again, and a lot of time has passed, again, you are pretty much reading a new book. You seriously are. And you're picking up new ideas that you didn't catch before. So that's why it's important to read good books over again, because in one chapter, you might be in a very non-resourceful state. You might be like tired or lazy, and you might skip over like a few of the chapters this way, right? But you come back and read it over again, you find out you have missed out on a lot of great information. And George Martin, he says, a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only once. And so reading to teach is a great way to learn, as we have covered in the deep learning lesson. And if you come from the frame of reading to teach others, you actually learn the subject a lot better. So as you are reading, come with that mindset of, okay, how can I read this to understand this so I can teach this to other people? You'll find out you'll learn it a lot better that way. So try to understand the subject rather than memorizing the subject. And a simple way you can do this is write a summary of what you learned after each chapter. Write a summary of what you learned after each chapter. In this way, it actually helps in two ways. So it helps you to learn it better, for sure, deep learning. And if you have to go back to a certain book, you don't have to read the entire book over again. You can just look at your summaries and get the general idea of the book. So it really saves you time in the long run if you do it this way. So here's a little case study. I would read a chapter, and then I would summarize the entire chapter. At the end of the books, I would go through my entire list of summaries. And so I pretty much have read the book 2 times if I did this. And then I would try to teach it to others. Right? I would really try to give a presentation or a speech or to present this to others so that they understand it. And that's what I am doing with this lesson to myself and to you, right? So I'm teaching you this, but it also creates a win-win situation where I am also reinforcing the learning to myself as well. The thing is, I don't do this with every book. I don't summarize every single book that I read. It's only if I am going to the book and I feel like, wow, this is a really great book, and I start highlighting everything. Then you know that it's a good idea to read that book deeply and to summarize the chapters. Then I would do the summary concept that I just talked about. All right, so your mission is pretty simple for this one. So it's become an avid lifelong reader and to make reading a daily habit. This is also going to go into your daily routine. And depending on your skill level, I would aim for about 1 to 2 books a month. Again, speed reading does have its time and place, but honestly, if we're really trying to deeply learn something, reading it a lot slower and more deliberate is better. So I would aim for about 1 to 2 books at least a month. And if you're a faster level, if you are used to reading books, then maybe 1 book a week. And really try to summarize, really try to learn as much as possible from the book. And number 2 is read with the mindset of learning and adding value to the world and others. Because if you teach this to others, if you teach what you learn to others, it creates a win-win situation for all. And I want to leave you off with a beautiful quote here. So this quote is by a special person by the name of Helen Keller. She says, "Such knowledge floods the soul unseen with a soundless tidal wave of deepening thought. Knowledge is power. Rather, knowledge is happiness, because to have knowledge, broad, deep knowledge, is to know true ends from false and lofty things from low. To know the thoughts and deeds that have marked man's progress is to feel the great heartthrobs of humanity through the centuries. And if one does not feel in these pulsations a heavenward striving, one must indeed be deaf to the harmonies of life." It's a beautiful quote by Helen Keller. So that's it for this lesson, my friend. Please read, please learn, please apply, and please do not be deaf to the harmonies of life. That's it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.